Hello, I'm Professor Claire Steeves. I'm a professor of aging and health, and I'm the clinical director of TwinsUK here at King's College London. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, I'm Dr. Deborah Hart, and I'm the Executive Director here at TwinsUK. Hello. We're delighted to introduce, this is our final webinar of a series that we've been doing for our 30th anniversary. And it's just celebrating what we've done in TwinsUK and particularly the contribution that all of our amazing twins have made. And today our webinar is going to be discussing the future of TwinsUK. Obviously, if you've been following our webinars, you'll have seen that we've made a number of amazing health and science discoveries over the 30 years. And we've become a very world-renowned, impressive resource for the scientific community. We have got lots of plans, which Claire's going to tell us something about. And it's not all without its challenges either. And science is incredibly rewarding, but no one said it will ever be easy, did they, Claire?
No, that's right. But thanks to the twins and the contributions that you've given over the years, we've got a great chance to really continue that contribution to science going forward in the future.
Okay, so Claire, can you tell us a little bit about what we're going to aim to do over the next few years? Maybe some short-term sort of aims and then our longer-term ambitions that we'd like to get stuck into with our twins.
Yeah, well, thanks, Debbie. Yeah, well, we're all getting older, and as we go through life, really being as resilient as possible to all that life throws at us is going to be really important for all of us. And that comes to sort of medical things, but also social things and ability to really function as independently as possible. So we're really interested in how twins can really help understand that better, because of course twins share genetic factors and they share some environmental factors from early life. But as they go through life, they may diverge in what they experience and their exposures that they have, which then makes a difference to how they age. So one of the things we're going to do over the next few years is really look at how that goes in an in-depth way in every single system of the body that we can measure using imaging. And we're going to be doing a big imaging study where we'll be inviting you to come up to have a full body MRI, which allows us to get markers of aging of all the organ systems from that imaging. And we'll be looking back at all the data that you've been giving us over the years about environmental exposures and differences in your internal body environment. And then we'll use them to really try and understand the aging process going forward. So that's one of the key things that we're going to be doing and starting that next year, Debbie.
Okay, and what other plans have we got after that, Claire, after that study? And I know that we're all working at the moment on some plans for how our health, what we can do to affect our health as well as our environment we live in.
Yes, that's right. And so thinking about how the body ages and changes over time and thinking about what twins particularly can add, we know that the natural experiment in the sense of twinning can really shed light on how the environment influences how we get health problems and how we age. And that intersection between the environment and aging is what we want to particularly look at going forward. And in particular, of course, now we've got other issues in our environment changing quite rapidly, things like viruses coming along and affecting each one of us differently, but also climate change and the effect of changing temperatures or also changing weather systems going forward in the future. But also we have a personal responsibility as well, don't we, to try and do our bit to change that and to make a difference to environmental change. And funnily enough, those changes that we can personally make might also make a real difference to aging. And in particular, we're talking about dietary changes. So we're going to be doing a big sort of, I guess, experiment together about how does a change to a much more sustainable diet, how does that interact with our body aging? Is it going to be really healthy for all of us? Are there going to be some of us that may need to sort of add things into the diet to make sure that it's really fully healthy for us? Or actually, is it going to be a really good diet for us all to adopt? And then we can share that information with the rest of the public and help them take a transition to a more healthy diet as well. So those are some of the two things that we'll be looking at. But also we've got collaborations with environmental scientists now who are really wanting to look at how differences in our environment, maybe our pollution, maybe exposure to light, things like temperature, as I say, how those fluctuations might change how the body ages. And of course, twins are a great natural experiment because we can study using twins things that otherwise we don't want to experiment and change on in a trial situation, but we can use differences in a natural variation in our population within twins who have that shared genetic background.
That's great, Claire. How exciting. And when we started the webinars, we asked twins to send in questions. And for this topic, they were very interested in finding out how we're funded and how we're going to be funded in the future. And of course, with these very ambitious studies that we would like to plan, they can be quite costly, especially MRIs and things like that. So do you want to talk a little bit about our funding?
Yeah, that's great. And of course, funders, I mean, we've always looked to a portfolio of different funders to fund our study. And the funders have their own agendas as well, which are shaped by the really key pressing needs in terms of health within our society. And so actually we're very well placed to be funded quite well because, of course, our aging population is a big issue for funders at the moment, and how, for example, development of multi-morbidity or having more than one, more than two, more than three different conditions. Those are really key priorities of funders at the moment. So we're well placed to sort of really understand how those things develop. But also, of course, funders actually now are really interested in climate change. And the reason why is because they perceive that that's going to be a really big effect on human health going forward. And so that's one of the reasons, again, why we're steering towards things that we think will be funded. But of course, there are multiple funders, aren't there? And one of the things we've got to do is keep an eye on what their funding strategies are, make sure we pivot to the important needs of the day. For example, COVID, doing a lot of work with all of you around the COVID pandemic. But also how that environment is changing in terms of the availability of funding. So, for example, in the last few years, availability of European funding has become much more difficult to get. Obviously, we're going to still be trying to do that, and there's some opportunities there, but it's somewhat shifted compared to before. And so we've got to really branch out and see whether other charities or commercial organisations that are really doing good work in the health space could join forces with us in order to answer important research questions together.
And that's really interesting, Claire, because our own institution at King's want us to find industrial partners, and you know, we can do so much more with that sort of size of investment. For example, our PREDICT study the diet study that we ran was very expensive and wouldn't have been possible without our collaboration with Zoe. So, and how does the university set up that sort of industrial commercial partner?
Yeah, so the university is really keen to make sure that all of the sharing of data, of course, all of our sharing of data is anonymized, but it's done under strict regulation as well when it's shared with commercial partners, and it's done with the consent of participants. So that's obviously very important. They go through a significant amount of legal work to make sure that there's fairness really in how intellectual property is is shared amongst the partners that are involved in a grant. And as you say, Debbie, one of the factors that's involved in commercial funding is that there is potentially more funding envelope, but also, of course, remember that it's also potentially going to lead to impact sooner. So, I mean, commercial organisations generally are in the line of making discoveries that can then lead to things that are going to change the world. So, for example, new medications, new drugs, new apps in the case of Zoe, or new ways of thinking about testing and understanding ourselves. And so because they're really on that translational end, actually they can lead to changes which actually have impact. And of course, that's what we all want to do. We want to have impact to improve the nation's health.
Great, that's a great explanation. Thanks, Claire. So another question that was really relevant to the future, and obviously as our cohort ages, is that twins have asked, will I still be useful to you if I can no longer come in and have a visit?
Yes, of course you are, because you can do a lot from home. And in fact, COVID has really shown us how much we can do from home. We're really exploring how we can do even more. For example, we've done home blood testing, home stool testing, home urine testing, home saliva testing. We've done home measures of things, even physical performance tests that we've been able to do over Zoom over the pandemic. But we've also done lots of questionnaires, and many people are interfacing with them, not just on postal, but now in online and even by apps. But also we can use wearable devices, sort of like Fitbit and Garmin and so on, to actually take further measures of the environment. And in fact, we've been talking to the Wellcome and other programs about how we can measure the environment within twins' homes more, so that we can really understand more about the environments they're exposed to, pollution, etc. So these are all things that we can do in the home. So it's going to be less and less needed for people to come in for visits. But it's always been something that's been a strength, because we've really measured and had that high fidelity of understanding what's going on in each individual, because we do visit some of them on occasion.
Great, thanks, Claire. And lastly, obviously twins, there's about 16,000 on our registry, but through COVID, we sort of expanded our research with twins by joining with other groups, and particularly there are twin registries like ours through the world, and there are other cohorts like ours that study aging and complex diseases. What plans in the future might we have to do more collaborative work like that?
Yes, thank you, Debbie, because this has been something that's really grown massively over the pandemic, and we want to really sort of like set that legacy for the future in sort of stone. Basically, what we've got done is we've gotten together as lots of longitudinal population studies, and so some of them are birth cohorts, many of them are not twin cohorts within the UK, but as you say, we have other twin cohorts internationally that we can collaborate with. If we pool our evidence up front, actually we can accelerate the ability to understand any scientific area, because instead of all publishing separately, it taking a long time, and then someone coming together and doing what's called a meta-analysis to make sure that all the results line up, we can do that actually together when we're first doing the analysis. And that helps us as well in terms of sharing ideas across the scientific community to make sure that we're really producing the best science in the fastest way possible. So that's really good. But of course, it's also really good if you're studying something that doesn't happen so often. For example, long COVID. To getting together with other cohorts, we can actually boost the numbers of people that we have to be able to study, which gives us greater power to detect effects, and that's really good. But the last reason why we really want to continue working with other cohorts is because sometimes another cohort, another longitudinal study finds a relationship between an environmental variable in particular, or something that we can't change in a trial, and a health event, yeah? And we're not sure whether or not that's actually causal, i.e. whether it's really causing the health event, or whether it's a kind of bystander or something that's just correlated with it. And there are a number of approaches that can be used, but one of them is looking at twin pairs, so pairs that are discordant in those exposures. Do they have the same effects? And so working with other scientists that might be working on another study, we can follow up their results within twins to see whether or not we're seeing the same effect when we adjust for the confounding of shared genetics. And that really tells us a little bit more information about whether something is likely to be causing an effect or not. And so that's something useful that we can all do by collaborating with other cohorts.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Claire. I mean, it's so exciting, and we just really had a really small insight into the big plans that we've got for the future. And we really hope as many of you twins would join in these projects as we get funded and move into them over the next few years. Our twins are amazingly engaged in all the activities that we've ever offered them. So we're really hoping that you carry on and join us for the next 30 years of research we've got planned, because we couldn't do any of it without you. And all of our new studies we will tell you about through email invites. We have information on our website. We always advertise studies through our newsletters to you. And please follow us on social media, because we often put information about new programs and research that we're doing. And so really, it's a big thank you from me, and I'm sure Claire as well.
It's a huge thank you from me and for all the researchers from the clinical side and from the analytical side. We're really grateful for everything that you've offered in the past and will do in the future.
Thank you very much.